He doesn't bark. He argues. Every morning, this German shepherd sits in front of his owner, a former Marine, and talks back in long, dramatic woo-woo sounds, like he's got an opinion about everything from how the blanket is folded to when it's time for coffee. It's funny, it's unexpected, and it's impossible not to smile. But here's what makes people go quiet when they hear the full story. A year ago, this dog couldn't make a sound at all. Not a bark, not a whine, not even a growl. He was found locked inside a rusted cage near a storm-soaked harbor, left alone in the rain, his body shutting down, his voice gone. And the man who rescued him, the Marine he now argues with every day, wasn't doing much better himself. Both of them had survived things they never talked about. Both of them had learned that silence was safer than hope. And no one, not the vet, not the neighbors, not even the man who brought him home, expected what would happen the night the thunder came back. And the dog finally decided to speak. Logan Pierce had learned to fold a blanket the same way he learned everything else in his adult life. Tight, precise, no wasted motion. Corners squared, edges aligned. It was a habit that had followed him home from the Marines and refused to leave, even years later. Even here, in a narrow trailer perched at the edge of Port Crescent, Oregon, where the sea fog crept in like a second skin and the rain never quite stopped. He had just finished smoothing the last crease when a sound rose behind him. Woo-woo-woo. Logan froze. He turned slowly, one eyebrow lifting as he looked down at the source of the interruption. A full-grown German shepherd sat on the faded rug by the door, head tilted, ears alert, amber eyes fixed on the blanket as if it had personally offended him. "You've got to be kidding me," Logan muttered. The dog leaned forward, sniffed the edge of the neatly folded fabric, then let out another sound. Longer this time, lower, with a distinct note of protest. "Woo!" Logan sighed. "It's a blanket, Harbour. It doesn't care how it's folded." Harbour's tail thumped once against the floor. Then he added a short, grumbling huff, as if to say that Logan was wrong and that this conversation was far from over. Logan shook his head, fighting a smile. "You done?" the dog responded immediately. "Woo-woo." For a moment, the trailer felt oddly alive. The heater hummed. Rain tapped against the thin metal roof. And in the middle of it all sat a German shepherd who, for reasons Logan still didn't fully understand, seemed determined to argue about household chores. A year ago, that same dog hadn't made a sound. The image came unbidden, cutting through the humor like a cold blade. Rain slashing sideways across the harbor, rusted steel, a cage tucked behind an abandoned warehouse. Silence so thick it felt deliberate. Logan's smile faded, just slightly before he caught himself. Harbour watched him closely, head tilting again, as if sensing the shift. "I'm fine," Logan said quietly, more to himself than to the dog. He picked up the blanket and placed it on the small shelf by the bed. Harbour followed the movement with his eyes, then let out one last, satisfied huff as though conceding the argument. For now. Logan grabbed his jacket and keys from the hook by the door. Outside, the rain had settled into its usual steady rhythm, soaking the gravel drive and blurring the line between sea and sky. Port Crescent was like that most days. A working harbor town that smelled of salt, diesel, and wet pine, where people nodded instead of waved and didn't ask many questions. It suited Logan just fine. As he opened the door, Harbour stood and padded over, nails clicking softly on the linoleum. He didn't rush ahead or crowd the doorway. He just waited, eyes bright, body loose but ready. "You coming?" Logan asked. Harbour answered with a short, eager woo, tail swishing against the doorframe. Logan paused, one hand on the knob, and looked down at him. There were still scars if you knew where to look. A faint line near the ear, a stiffness that crept in when thunder rolled too close. But there was something else now, too. Something awake, If these stories touch your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Paws of Courage. Every click helps us share more tales of courage, compassion, and the incredible bonds that change lives. One dog, one human, one story at a time. Logan stepped out into the rain, Harbor at his side. The town was quiet that morning. Fishing boats rocked gently in their slips. A gull cried somewhere near the pier, its voice cutting clean through the mist. Logan locked the door and started toward his truck, Harbor trotting beside him, occasionally glancing up as if checking in. Most people in Port Crescent knew Logan as the guy who fixed generators and kept to himself. He worked when he was called, didn't talk much, and left before anyone could invite him to stay. He'd been back from overseas for years, but something about him still felt distant, like a man standing half a step outside his own life. What most of them didn't know was that Logan hated noise. Not the everyday kind, the hum of engines, the clatter of tools, but sudden sounds. Sharp ones, metal on metal, thunder cracking too close to the ground. Those sounds did things to his body before his mind could catch up. Tightened his chest, locked his jaw, took him somewhere else. That was part of why the silence of that cage had stayed with him. As he drove toward the edge of town, windshield wipers pushing rain aside in steady arcs, Logan's thoughts drifted back despite his efforts to keep them anchored in the present. He remembered the phone vibrating on the counter late one night. The name on the screen, Dr. Maya Chen. He remembered the photo she'd sent. A blur at first glance, then the shape of ribs, the angle of a head, held too low. Eyes that didn't ask for help because they'd already learned not to expect it. And he remembered thinking, not my problem. The truck slowed at a stop sign. Harbor shifted on the seat beside him, letting out a soft, questioning sound. "I know," Logan said under his breath. "I know." Rain streaked the glass, turning the harbor lights into long, trembling lines. Logan exhaled slowly, grounding himself in the moment. The weight of the steering wheel, the familiar ache in his shoulder, the solid warmth of the dog beside him. Harbor leaned closer, pressing his side lightly against Logan's arm. That, too, was new. A year ago, the dog had flinched at any movement, any sound, any touch. He had lived inside his own head, just like Logan did, pacing invisible fences, waiting for something bad to happen. Logan turned onto the narrow road that led back toward home. The rain eased, just a little, and the fog began to lift. He glanced down at Harbor, who was watching the road ahead with calm focus. "You've got a lot to say these days," Logan said, a hint of amusement returning to his voice. Harbor responded with a low conversational woo, as if agreeing. Logan smiled, this time without stopping himself. He didn't know it yet, but everything about that voice, the way it filled the quiet, the way it refused to stay buried, had started in the rain, behind a rusted door, on a night when silence almost won. And this was only the beginning. Logan Pierce hadn't always lived like this. There was a time when his mornings began before sunrise, with shouted orders and boots hitting concrete in perfect rhythm. A time when noise meant structure, when chaos was something you trained for, prepared against, learned to master. Back then, sound didn't frighten him. It sharpened him. That was before he came home. Port Crescent wasn't the place Logan imagined he'd end up. He hadn't imagined any place, really. When he left the Marines, he didn't return to a hometown filled with familiar faces or settle near family. He followed work instead, drifting north along the coast until the road narrowed. The population thinned, and the ocean pressed close enough to smell. Port Crescent was small, weather-beaten, and unassuming. It asked nothing of him beyond showing up when something broke. That suited him. He lived in a trailer set back from the road, just far enough that passing cars faded into background hum. The trees shielded the worst of the wind, and the sea, though always present, stayed at a respectful distance. Inside, the space was spare. A narrow bed, a small table, one chair that faced the window. Everything had a place, and nothing was there without a reason. Logan liked it that way. He made his coffee black and strong, drank it standing by the counter, eyes fixed on whatever gray shape the fog had taken that morning. Some days it pressed close, wrapping the trailer in silence. Other days it lifted just enough to reveal the water beyond the trees, dark and restless. He never left the radio on, never turned on the television. Sound, when it came on his terms. That was the arrangement he'd made with the world. The work came steadily enough. Generators didn't care who fixed them, only that someone did. Logan kept his tools clean and his interactions brief. He listened more than he spoke. People noticed that about him, though they rarely commented. In a town like Port Crescent, quiet men didn't stand out. They blended in. What didn't blend in was the way Logan flinched when something fell unexpectedly, or how his jaw tightened when a truck backfired too close. Those moments passed quickly, but they left a residue he couldn't quite shake. He hated that part of himself, the way his body reacted before his mind could catch up. It felt like weakness, Harbour noticed. From the moment the dog began to settle into the trailer, he watched Logan with an intensity that was hard to describe. Not the eager attention of a dog waiting for commands, but something steadier, almost studious. Harbour learned Logan's rhythms before he learned the house. He knew when Logan would reach for his mug, when he'd pause at the window, when his shoulders stiffened without warning. When Logan paced, Harbour followed at a distance. When Logan sat too long, staring at nothing, Harbour would shift positions, nails clicking softly, just enough to remind him he wasn't alone. The dog rarely made a sound during those early days. No barking, no whining, just the occasional huff of breath, the soft scrape of paws on the floor. Silence, but not empty silence. Attentive silence. Logan understood that better than most. Sometimes, late at night when sleep refused to come, Logan would sit at the small table with his hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. The past crept in during those hours, uninvited and persistent. Faces he hadn't thought about in years surfaced without warning. Moments replayed themselves, sharper than they had any right to be. He'd learned to manage it. Breathe in, breathe out. Ground yourself in the room. Count what you can see, what you can touch. On more than one of those nights, Harbour would lift his head and watch Logan quietly, eyes reflecting the faint light from the window. He never approached unless invited. He simply stayed alert, as if standing guard over something fragile. Logan had never owned a dog before. He hadn't planned to start now. Animals required presence, patience, emotional availability, all things he wasn't sure he had left to give. But Harbour hadn't asked for much. Food, warmth, space, and time. That was the part Logan hadn't expected. Time stretched differently with the dogs there. Mornings came a little softer. Evenings passed without quite so much weight pressing down on his chest. The silence he'd built his life around began to shift, not disappearing, but changing shape. It no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a room. Logan told himself it was temporary. Everything was temporary. He'd learned that lesson well enough. Still, there were moments that unsettled him, like the first time Harbour followed him all the way to the edge of the property and stopped, staring out toward the road as if bracing himself. Or the way the dog froze at the sound of metal clanging at the harbour, muscles locking until Logan spoke his name. "Harbour," he'd said then, voice low and steady. The dog had looked at him, eyes searching, and slowly eased back into himself. Logan remembered standing there afterward, rain soaking through his jacket, wondering when he'd started sounding so sure of himself. He wasn't sure if he liked the answer. The past hadn't loosened its grip on him, not really. It still lived in the tightness of his shoulders, the way he scanned a room without thinking, the careful distance he kept from people who might ask too much. He told himself He was fine. He was functioning. That had to count for something. But there was a difference now. There was someone else in the room. Harbour didn't push, didn't demand, didn't expect Logan to be anything other than what he was in that moment. The dog simply existed beside him, steady and watchful, as if saying without words, "I'm here. That's enough for now." Logan hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone had stayed. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the roof, Logan sat on the floor cleaning his tools. Harbour lay a few feet away, head on his paws, eyes half closed. Logan tapped the handle of a wrench against the mat without thinking. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed lightly in the small space. Harbour lifted his head. After a pause, he shifted forward and tapped one paw against the floor. Then another. Not 3 times, just 2. Logan stopped moving. He looked at the dog, who stared back calmly. Tail still, ears relaxed. "Well," Logan said quietly, a strange tightness in his throat. "Would you look at that?" Harbour let out a soft huff and settled back down. Logan leaned against the counter, tools forgotten, and allowed himself a small, careful smile. For the first time in a long while, the quiet didn't feel like something he had to survive. It felt like something he could share. The phone buzzed on the counter just after dusk, startling Logan despite himself. He had been standing at the sink, rinsing out his coffee mug, the rain outside tapping softly against the trailer like a patient knuckle. Harbour lay near the door, head on his paws, eyes open but relaxed. When the sound cut through the quiet, the dog's ears lifted instantly, body tensing before Logan even turned. "It's fine," Logan said out of habit, though he hadn't checked the screen yet. The phone buzzed again. Logan wiped his hands on a towel and picked it up. The name on the screen made his chest tighten. Maya Chen. He didn't answer right away. He rarely did with anyone. Calls usually meant something broken, something urgent, something that required more from him than he felt ready to give. He stared at the screen until the buzzing stopped, leaving the trailer quiet again. Harbour watched him, head tilted slightly. "Not our problem," Logan muttered, setting the phone face down on the counter. He went back to the sink, turned the water on too hard, then shut it off just as quickly. The quiet pressed in around him. His eyes drifted to the window, to the dark line of trees beyond, and then, without warning, to something else entirely. A cage. Not here. Not now. But sharp and clear in his mind. Rusted bars, slick with rain. A shape curled too tight inside, eyes that didn't plead anymore because pleading had stopped working. Logan closed his eyes and breathed in through his nose, out through his mouth. Count what you can hear. The rain, the hum of the heater. Harbour's slow, steady breathing. The phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Pierce," he said, voice even. "Logan," Maya said. She didn't bother with small talk. She never did. "I'm sorry to call this late." "What's wrong?" He already knew. There was a pause on the line, brief but heavy. "We've got a dog," she said. "German Shepherd, young, found near the old warehouses by the harbour." Logan leaned against the counter, eyes closing. Harbour rose quietly and padded closer, stopping just short of touching him. "Animal control?" Logan asked. "Overloaded," Maya replied. "They're stretched thin with the storm coming in. If they get there first, he'll go to intake. You know how that goes right now." Logan did know. Too many animals. Not enough space. Decisions made by numbers instead of faces. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, though the question felt disingenuous. "I want you to come look," Maya said. "Just look. I can't leave the clinic, and I don't trust the situation." There was another pause, longer this time. "He's locked up," she added quietly. "In a transport cage. Looks like he's been there a while." The word locked did something unpleasant to Logan's chest. "I'm not the guy for this," he said. "I know," Maya replied. "That's why I called." Logan exhaled slowly. He glanced down at Harbour, who stood beside him now, eyes searching his face with calm intensity. "Send me what you got," Logan said. The line went dead a second later. Moments passed, then his phone chimed. A single photo filled the screen. At first glance, it was just shadows and rain. Then the shape resolved itself, a cage tucked beneath a sagging overhang. Rust along the bars, and inside, barely visible, a dog curled inward, ribs faintly outlined beneath wet fur. The dog's head was turned toward the camera, but the eyes weren't focused on anything in particular. No fear, no hope, just absence. Logan's grip tightened around the phone. Behind him, Harbour let out a soft sound. Not a bark, just a breath pushed out with concern. "I'm not going," Logan said, more firmly now, as if convincing himself. He set the phone down and reached for his jacket, then stopped. He hadn't planned to go anywhere. He hadn't even put his boots on. The rain outside intensified, drumming harder against the roof. Logan paced the length of the trailer once, then again. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling the familiar agitation rise. This wasn't his responsibility. He had his routines, his boundaries. He had worked hard to keep his life contained. Harbour followed his movement with his eyes, then stood and walked to the door. He didn't whine or paw at it. He simply stood there, waiting. Logan stopped pacing. "You don't even know what this is," Logan said quietly. Harbour looked back at him, ears relaxed, gaze steady. Logan swallowed. The image on the phone flared again in his mind, uninvited. A cage. Rain. Silence thick enough to drown in. He thought of the night Harbour had come into his life, soaked and shaking, the way the dog had frozen when the door opened as if freedom itself were unfamiliar. He reached for his boots. "Damn it," Logan muttered. The drive to the Harbour was short, but felt longer in the rain. Streetlights blurred into pale streaks against the windshield. Logan kept both hands tight on the wheel, jaw clenched, eyes scanning the road out of habit. Harbour sat upright on the passenger seat, watching the world pass with quiet focus. As they neared the old warehouses, the air changed. The smell of salt gave way to rust and oil. The buildings loomed dark and half forgotten, their windows black, their doors warped with age. Logan parked near the edge of the lot and shut off the engine. For a moment he just sat there, listening to the rain hammer against the truck. "You stay," he told Harbour. The dog hesitated, then lay down, eyes still on Logan. Logan stepped out into the rain, jacket pulled tight, boots sinking into wet gravel. The world felt smaller here, closed in by metal and shadow. He moved slowly, scanning, listening. Then he heard it. Not a bark, not a whine. Something caught in between, a sound like breath trying to become a voice and failing. Logan followed it, heart pounding until he saw the cage tucked behind a leaning pallet, half hidden from the road. He crouched, rain soaking through his jeans, and peered inside. The dog didn't move. Logan reached out, fingers brushing the cold metal bars. "Hey," he said softly, voice steady despite the noise in his head. "I'm here." The eyes flicked toward him, dull but aware. In that moment, Logan understood something he hadn't before. Some calls weren't meant to be ignored. They were meant to change you. Rain slicked Logan's jacket as he crouched in front of the cage, water dripping from the brim of his cap onto the gravel below. The sound was steady, almost hypnotic, but the dog inside didn't react to it. He didn't flinch, didn't shift. He simply remained curled in on himself, ribs faintly visible beneath soaked fur, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the rusted bars. Logan took a slow breath and held it. Up close, the cage looked worse than it had in the photo. The metal was pitted and flaking, the latch stiff with rust. A transport crate meant for short trips, not for nights left in the open, not for storms like this. The ground beneath it was muddy, the corners half buried where water had pooled. "Hey," Logan said again, keeping his voice low and even. He didn't move closer. He didn't reach in. He had learned, long ago, that sudden movements could turn a bad situation into a dangerous one. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dog's eyes flicked toward him. Just a flicker, barely there, but it was something. They were a pale amber, dulled by exhaustion, framed by fur clumped with grime and rain. One ear drooped lower than the other, the tip nicked as if it had once been torn and never properly healed. Still no sound. Logan shifted his weight, knees protesting against the cold ground. The rain soaked through his jeans, but he barely noticed. His attention stayed fixed on the dog, on the way its chest rose and fell too quickly, on the way its body stayed coiled as if expecting a blow that never came. "It's all right," Logan murmured. "You're not in trouble." The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't used them often in his own life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small screwdriver from his tool kit, the metal cool and familiar in his hand. Slowly, deliberately, he brought it to the latch. The dog watched the movement, eyes widening just a fraction, muscles tightening beneath the skin. "I'm going to open this," Logan said, narrating each step. "You don't have to do anything." The latch resisted at first, then gave with a sharp scrape that cut through the rain. The sound echoed against the warehouse wall, harsh and sudden. The dog flinched, pressing himself tighter into the corner of the cage. Logan froze. "Easy," he said softly. "Easy." He waited. Seconds passed. The rain continued its steady rhythm as if nothing had happened. The dog's breathing slowed just a little. Logan loosened the latch the rest of the way and swung the door open. Nothing happened. The dog didn't bolt, didn't lunge, didn't even lift his head. He stayed exactly where he was, eyes darting from the open door to Logan's face and back again, as if unsure what the opening meant. Logan felt a tightness spread through his chest. He set the screwdriver down and rested his forearms on his knees, lowering himself until his eyes were level with the cage. He kept his hands visible, palms open. "You can come out," he said. "Or you can stay. It's your call." The dog stared at him. Minutes passed. Rain soaked deeper into Logan's clothes, the cold creeping up through his bones. He didn't move. He didn't rush. He had learned patience the hard way, and if there was one thing he could offer now, it was time. Finally, the dog's nose twitched. It moved forward an inch, then stopped. The dog's body trembled, just barely perceptible beneath the wet fur. His eyes dropped to Logan's hands, then to Logan's wrist, where a thin white scar curved along the skin. The dog leaned closer, sniffing the air. Logan held his breath. The dog took another step, then another. Slowly, stiffly, as if his legs weren't quite sure how to work outside the confines of the cage. When he reached the threshold, he paused again, frozen between inside and out. Logan felt his throat tighten. "That's it," he whispered. "You're doing fine." The dog stepped out. The moment was quiet, almost anticlimactic. No dramatic rush, no sudden burst of movement, just a tired animal standing in the rain, unsure of what came next. Logan reached for his jacket and shrugged it off, draping it gently over the dog's back. The fabric was warm from his body heat. The dog didn't resist. He didn't react at all except to lower his head slightly, as if the weight of the jacket anchored him to the ground. "Let's get you out of here," Logan said. He scooped the dog up carefully, supporting his chest and hindquarters, mindful of how light he felt. Too light. The dog's heart fluttered against Logan's arm, fast and shallow. As Logan carried him back toward the truck, the rain began to ease, tapering off into a fine mist. Harbor, though Logan didn't know the name yet, blinked slowly, eyes half-lidded, as if the effort of being awake was more than he could manage. Logan opened the passenger door and settled the dog onto the seat, wrapping him in the jacket. He cranked the heater, the engine rumbling to life beneath them. The dog let out a sound then. Not a bark, not a whine, just a breath, long and broken, like something being released after a long time held in. Logan glanced at him, heart hammering. "I know," he said quietly. "I know." They pulled away from the warehouses, the dark shapes receding into the rain. The road curved along the harbor, water glinting faintly beneath the streetlights. Logan kept one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near the dog, not quite touching, ready if needed. "You'll need a name," Logan said after a while, his voice barely louder than the hum of the engine. "Something that fits." The truck passed a weathered sign near the edge of the road, paint peeling, letters half-faded. "Harbor Point." Logan nodded to himself. "Harbor," he said. "That work for you?" The dog didn't respond, but his eyes shifted toward Logan's voice, focusing for the first time. "Harbor," Logan repeated. Softer now. Something settled between them then, quiet and solid. When they reached the trailer, Logan carried Harbor inside and laid him on a blanket near the heater. The dog didn't move much, just watched as Logan filled a bowl with water and set it nearby. "You're safe," Logan said, more firmly now, as if saying it made it true. "You're not going back." Harbor's eyes followed him, steady and watchful. For the first time that night, Logan allowed himself to believe it. The days that followed blurred together in a way Logan hadn't experienced in years. Not because they were empty, but because they were steady, measured, quiet in a way that didn't demand anything from him. Harbor spent most of the first morning exactly where Logan had left him, on the blanket near the heater, body curled in a loose half-moon, eyes open. He didn't sleep, not really. He watched, every shift of light through the window, every creak of the trailer settling, every movement Logan made as he crossed the small space with careful steps. Logan noticed, though he pretended not to. He moved slower than usual, conscious of the weight of another presence in the room. He filled a bowl with water and set it within reach, then stepped back. Harbor stared at it for a long time before lowering his head to drink, tongue barely touching the surface, as if unsure the water would stay. When Logan set down a small dish of food, Harbor sniffed once and turned his head away. "That's fine," Logan said quietly. "We'll try again later." He meant it. That became the rhythm between them. Offer, wait, step back. Logan didn't coax or plead. He remembered too well what it felt like to be pushed before you were ready. Harbor seemed to understand that instinctively. He accepted what he could and ignored the rest, his body dictating the pace. By the second day, Harbor began to move more. Not freely, not confidently, but enough to explore the edges of the trailer. He traced the walls, nose close to the floor, stopping often to listen. He flinched when the heater clicked on too loudly, when a gull cried overhead, when a truck rumbled past on the road. Each time his body tensed, ready to retreat. Each time, Logan stayed where he was. "Easy," he'd say, voice calm, grounded. "It's all right." Harbor would look at him, eyes searching, then slowly ease back into himself. Logan didn't miss the way those moments mirrored his own. At night, sleep came in fragments. Logan lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain slide down the sides of the trailer. Harbor lay near the door, always near the door, head on his paws, eyes open. Sometimes Logan wondered if the dog slept at all. Once, in the early hours before dawn, Logan shifted in his bed and Harbor's head lifted instantly, ears pricking. Logan stilled, waiting for the tension to pass. "You don't have to guard the place," he murmured. Harbor didn't move, but the stiffness in his shoulders softened just a little. On the third morning, Logan brewed coffee and stood by the counter, mug warming his hands. Without thinking, he tapped the handle of the mug against the countertop. Once, twice, 3 times. It was an old habit. Something he'd done for as long as he could remember, a way of anchoring himself when his thoughts threatened to wander. The sound echoed softly in the trailer. Harbour lifted his head. Logan didn't notice at first. He took a sip of coffee, staring out the window at the fog rolling in from the sea. Then he heard it. Tap, tap. He turned slowly. Harbour had shifted his weight forward, one paw lifted. He brought it down gently against the floor. Then again, 2 deliberate taps. Not rushed, not random. Logan froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the faint hiss of the heater and the distant cry of a gull. "Well," Logan said finally, voice low, almost reverent, "I'll be damned." Harbour's ears flicked. He let out a small huff, then settled back down, resting his chin on his paws as if nothing unusual had happened. Logan leaned against the counter, heart beating a little faster than it should have. He didn't know why it mattered so much. It was just a coincidence, he told himself. Dogs mirrored behavior all the time. Still, the quiet felt different after that. Less like a void, more like a conversation waiting to happen. As the week wore on, Harbour began to eat more regularly. Small meals at first, then larger ones. His movements grew a touch surer, though he still favored the edges of the room. He learned where the sunlight fell in the afternoons and positioned himself just outside it, close enough to feel the warmth without stepping fully into it. Logan watched these small changes with the same focus he brought to his work. He didn't rush the progress or celebrate it out loud. He simply noted it, stored it away, let it be enough. There were setbacks, too. One afternoon, a stack of tools slipped from the counter and clattered to the floor. The sound was sharp and sudden, metal on metal. Harbour bolted, slamming into the door, body trembling. Logan's own heart jumped into his throat. For a split second, the room tilted, memories rushing in uninvited. He caught himself on the edge of the table, fingers digging into the wood. "Not here," he muttered under his breath. "Not now." He lowered himself slowly to the floor, keeping his movements deliberate. He didn't approach Harbour. He didn't reach out. He just sat, back against the wall, and waited. "It's over," he said quietly. "Just noise." Minutes passed. Harbour's breathing slowed from panicked gasps to shaky inhales. Eventually, he inched away from the door and returned to his blanket, though he kept his eyes on Logan the entire time. Logan stayed where he was until the tension drained from his own body. That night, as the rain returned in earnest, Logan sat at the small table cleaning his tools. Harbour lay nearby, eyes half closed. Logan tapped the handle of a wrench against the mat. Once, twice, 3 times. After a pause, Harbour tapped back. 2 soft, deliberate taps. Logan smiled to himself, the expression unfamiliar, but welcome. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. In the quiet of the trailer, with the rain outside and the steady hum of warmth inside, something fragile but real began to take shape. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. 2 lives moving at the same pace, learning how to listen to the silence without being swallowed by it. And for the first time in a long while, Logan didn't feel the urge to run from it. The knock on the trailer door came just after noon, sharp and impatient, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Logan looked up from the generator part spread across his table, irritation flaring briefly before instinct took over. He stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and glanced toward Harbour. The dog was already on his feet, body tense, ears forward, eyes fixed on the door. "Stay," Logan said softly. Harbour hesitated, then backed a step toward the wall, muscles still tight. Logan opened the door. The man standing outside was broad-shouldered and thick through the chest, his jacket stained with oil and rust. He smelled faintly of cigarettes and seawater. His eyes flicked past Logan, scanning the interior of the trailer with quick, possessive movements. "Yeah," the man said, voice rough. "You've got my dog." Logan didn't move. "I don't think so." The man's jaw tightened. "German Shepherd. Young, one ear bent funny. Went missing a couple weeks back." His gaze sharpened. "That him?" Behind Logan, Harbour shifted. A low tension rolled through his body, subtle but unmistakable. "What's your name?" Logan asked. "Cal Bennett," the man snapped. "And that dog belongs to me." Logan studied him carefully. He'd learned to read people a long time ago, not just what they said, but how they stood, how their eyes moved, where their hands rested. Cal's hands flexed at his sides, fingers twitching as if already reaching for something. "He was locked in a cage behind the warehouses," Logan said evenly. "In the rain." Cal scoffed. "So, he's a working dog. You don't know how to handle him." Harbour let out a small sound then. Not a bark, not a growl, just a breath pushed out sharply through his nose. His body pressed closer to the wall, eyes wide and fixed on Cal. Logan felt something cold settle in his chest. "You should leave," Logan said. Cal took a step forward instead. "I'm not leaving without my dog." Logan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You leave now," he said again, slower this time, "or I call the sheriff." Cal laughed, short and humorless. "Go ahead. I've got papers." "Then you won't mind sorting it out at the clinic," Logan replied, "with the vet." Cal's eyes flicked toward Harbour again. The dog flinched, shoulders drawing inward. For a moment, Logan thought Cal might push past him. The tension in the air thickened, old instincts stirring uncomfortably in Logan's gut. Then Cal stepped back, lips curling. "Fine," he said. "Clinic, but I'm taking him home today." Logan closed the door without another word. The drive to the clinic was quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzed beneath the surface. Harbour lay on the back seat this time, body rigid, eyes fixed on the passing trees. Logan kept his hands steady on the wheel, breathing slow and controlled. "It's all right," he said quietly. "I've got you." Harbour didn't look at him. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and damp fur. Dr. Maya Chen looked up from the counter as Logan walked in, her expression shifting the instant she saw his face. "What happened?" she asked. Before Logan could answer, the door slammed open behind them. Cal strode in, boots heavy against the tile. "That's my dog," Cal said loudly. Maya's eyes narrowed. "Sir, you'll need to lower your voice." Logan guided Harbour gently toward the exam room, keeping his body between the dog and Cal. Harbour's steps were hesitant, uneven, his breathing shallow. Maya followed them in, closing the door behind her. She crouched near Harbour, her movements slow and deliberate, eyes taking in every detail, the scars along his neck, the way his muscles trembled, the dullness still lingering beneath his gaze. "You found him like this?" she asked Logan quietly. "Yes," she nodded once. "I'll need to examine him." Cal pushed into the room without waiting for permission. "You're wasting time. He's mine." Maya straightened, her voice calm but firm. "Then you won't mind us documenting his condition?" She ran practiced hands along Harbour's ribs, neck and shoulders. Harbour stiffened but didn't pull away. His eyes flicked constantly toward Cal, panic tightening his features. Maya's jaw tightened as her fingers traced faint scars beneath the fur. "These marks are from prolonged restraint," she said flatly. "Rope or cable? Left on too long." Cal snorted. "Dogs get marks." "Not like this," Maya replied. She looked up at him. "Where's his microchip registration?" Cal hesitated. Just a fraction of a second too long. "Didn't ship him yet," he said. "Was going to." And veterinary records? Maya pressed. Cal's face flushed. I don't keep paperwork on a dog. Logan felt Harbour shift beside him, his body trembling harder now. Cal took a step closer, impatience edging into his movements. Come here, Cal said, reaching out. That was when Harbour made the sound. It wasn't loud, it wasn't strong, but it cut through the room like a crack in glass. A low, broken noise, half growl, half whine, followed by a breathy woo, uncertain and strained. Everyone froze. Harbour's eyes were locked on Cal, wide and glistening, his body crouched but unmoving. The sound hung in the air, fragile and defiant all at once. Logan's chest tightened. Maya straightened slowly. That, she said quietly, is a fear response. Cal scoffed, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He's just being dramatic. No, Maya said. He's terrified. She turned to Logan. I'm calling animal control and filing a report. Given his condition, this dog will remain here until ownership is determined. Cal's face darkened. You can't do that. I can, Maya replied calmly. And I am. Cal stared at Harbour one last time. The dog didn't look away. Fine, Cal snapped. Enjoy him while you can. He turned and stormed out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the walls. The room fell quiet again. Harbour's legs gave out and he sank to the floor shaking. Logan knelt beside him, not touching, just close enough. It's over, he said softly. You did good. Harbour's breathing slowed, though his eyes stayed open. Watching? Maya exhaled slowly. You okay? She asked Logan. Logan nodded, though his hands trembled slightly. Yeah. Maya glanced down at Harbour, then back up at Logan. He trusted you enough to speak, she said. That matters. Logan looked at the dog, heart pounding. He hadn't known what he was waiting for, but now that he'd heard it, he knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. The storm rolled in after sunset, the way coastal storms often did. Quiet at first, almost polite. The air grew heavy. The wind shifted direction. Even the gulls went silent, retreating from the harbour as if they knew better. Logan felt it before he heard it. He stood at the small window of the trailer, watching the trees bend and sway, their tops disappearing into low clouds. Harbour lay near the heater, head resting on his paws, eyes open but unfocused. His ears twitched once, then again, tracking something distant and unseen. It's just weather, Logan said softly, more to himself than to the dog. The first crack of thunder answered him. It wasn't close, not yet. Just a low, rolling sound that vibrated through the walls and settled in Logan's chest like a warning. His shoulders tightened without permission. His jaw clenched. He forced a slow breath through his nose and let it out carefully. Harbour lifted his head. The second crack came sooner, sharper. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Rain began to hammer against the roof, no longer patient, no longer gentle. Harbour stood abruptly, nails scraping against the floor. His body lowered, muscles bunching tight as wire. His tail tucked in close to his belly. Easy, Logan said, holding his voice steady. It's okay. Another flash lit the trailer white for an instant, followed by thunder so loud it seemed to split the air in half. Harbour bolted. He slammed into the small table, sending a chair skidding across the floor. A mug shattered, ceramic exploding into sharp white fragments. The sound was violent and sudden, and far too familiar. Logan's vision tunneled. For a split second, he wasn't in the trailer anymore. He was somewhere else. Heat, dust, noise pressing in from all sides. His heart raced, breath coming too fast, too shallow. The walls felt closer, the ceiling lower. Not here. Logan grabbed the edge of the counter, fingers digging into the worn wood until the sensation anchored him. Not here, he muttered through clenched teeth. Not now. Another crack of thunder shook the trailer. Harbour had wedged himself beneath the table, body curled impossibly tight, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. His eyes were wide and wild, darting at every sound. A thin, broken whine escaped his throat before he could stop it. Logan's instinct screamed at him to do something, fix it, control it, make it stop. Instead, he forced himself to sit down on the floor several feet away. He didn't reach for Harbour. He didn't crowd him. He remembered too well what panic felt like when someone stood too close. "I'm here," Logan said, voice low and even. He kept his eyes on a spot just beside Harbour, not staring, not challenging. "You're safe." The thunder came again, relentless. Harbour's breathing hitched. He pressed himself farther back, claws scraping uselessly against the floor. Another sound tore out of him, higher this time, raw and uncontrolled. Logan felt his own hands shaking. He placed them flat on the floor, grounding himself in the cool surface. "I know," he said softly. "I know what it sounds like." The words surprised him. He hadn't planned to say them. They came anyway. "It fooled me too," he continued carefully, choosing each word like a step across thin ice. "Sounds like something it's not." The storm raged on outside, rain pounding, thunder cracking so close the windows rattled. The trailer felt small and fragile against it, but Logan stayed where he was, breathing slow, steady, deliberate. Harbour's eyes flicked toward him just for a moment. "That's it," Logan murmured. "Stay with me." The next thunderclap was the loudest yet. Harbour let out a string of sounds then, whine, huff, a broken, breathy woo that seemed to tear itself free from deep in his chest. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't communication in any simple sense. It was fear finding a voice. Logan swallowed hard. "It's all right," he said, louder now, not to overpower the noise but to cut through it. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." Minutes passed. Or maybe it was longer. Time blurred under the weight of sound and memory. Logan stayed seated on the floor, back against the cabinet, every muscle screaming to flee, to shut down, to disappear. He didn't. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Harbour's shaking eased. His breathing slowed from frantic gasps to uneven pulls of air. The sounds he made softened, dropping to low huffs and quiet whines that faded as quickly as they came. Another flash lit the room, followed by thunder that rolled rather than cracked. Harbour shifted. Just an inch at first, then another. Logan held perfectly still. The dog inched forward, dragging himself out from beneath the table. His movements were hesitant, unsure, but deliberate. He stopped a foot away from Logan, body trembling, eyes locked onto his face as if searching for confirmation that this was real. Logan didn't move. He didn't speak. Harbour lowered his head and rested it gently against Logan's knee. The contact was light, tentative, but it landed like a weight in Logan's chest. His breath caught. He stared down at the dog, afraid that any movement might shatter the moment. "It's okay," he whispered, voice breaking despite his efforts. "You're okay." Harbour exhaled, a long, trembling sigh that seemed to empty something out of him. He stayed there, head pressed to Logan's leg, as the storm continued to rage outside. Logan reached out slowly, giving Harbour time to pull away if he needed to. When the dog didn't move, Logan rested his hand lightly on the back of Harbour's neck. Warm, solid, real. They stayed like that until the thunder faded into the distance and the rain softened to a steady patter once more. The trailer settled back into its familiar sounds, the hum of the heater, the creak of cooling metal. Eventually, Harbour lay down at Logan's side, exhaustion overtaking him. His breathing deepened, steady and slow. Logan leaned his head back against the cabinet and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he realized something important. The storm hadn't passed because he was strong. It had passed because he stayed. Morning came quietly, as if the storm had taken everything loud with it when it left. Logan woke on the floor, his back stiff, his neck sore, the pale light of early day slipping through the thin curtains. For a moment, he didn't move. He listened. No thunder, no rain, just the low hum of the heater and the steady rhythm of breathing beside him. Harbour lay stretched out against his leg, head resting where Logan's knee met the floor. The dog's chest rose and fell in a deep, even pattern. His ears twitched once, then stilled. Logan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You stayed," Logan murmured. Harbour's eyes opened slowly. He looked up at Logan, then, to Logan's surprise, he shifted closer and pressed his shoulder lightly into him. Not out of fear this time, out of choice. Logan swallowed hard and rested his hand on Harbour's back. "Yeah," he said softly. "So did I." Life didn't change all at once after that night. It changed the way most real things did, gradually, in ways you only noticed if you were paying attention. Harbour began to sleep through the night. He stopped positioning himself at the door and started choosing places closer to Logan instead. He followed him from room to room, not hovering, just present. And little by little, the sounds came. At first, it was just breath. A low huff when Logan stood up too quickly. A short, uncertain whine when Logan left the room. Then one morning, as Logan struggled with a stubborn jar of peanut butter, Harbour let out a sound that made Logan freeze. "Woo." Logan turned slowly. "Did you just talk to me?" Harbour's tail wagged once. Logan laughed, the sound rusty and surprised, like it hadn't been used in a while. "I'll take that as a yes." From then on, Harbour found his voice with enthusiasm. He commented on everything: Logan folding laundry, Logan putting on his boots, Logan trying to gap a blanket just a little too tight. "Woo-woo," Harbour would say, head tilted, eyes bright. "You have an opinion about that, do you?" Logan would reply. "Woo." The first time it happened, Logan nearly dropped the blanket. The clinic resolved things too. Maya called a week later with the final word. No valid claim of ownership. Enough evidence of neglect to close the case. Harbour was officially Logan's. Logan thanked her, voice steady. When he hung up, he sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, Harbour's head resting on his foot. "We're staying," Logan said finally. Harbour answered with a pleased low "woo." Word travelled fast in Port Crescent. It always did. The quiet Marine who fixed generators now had a German shepherd who seemed to hold full conversations. People stopped by more often, neighbors with questions, kids from down the road hoping to hear the dog talk. Logan didn't mind as much as he thought he would. One afternoon, a young boy crouched near the edge of the yard and called out, "Hey, dog!" Harbour lifted his head, considered the situation, then replied with a short, dignified "woo." The boy laughed, wide-eyed. "He answered me." Logan smiled from the porch. He does that. Even Cal didn't come back. Whatever fight he'd had in him seemed to drain away once the paperwork was final. The harbour returned to its usual rhythms, boats in, boats out, life continuing, indifferent and persistent. Inside the trailer, things felt different. Logan still hated sudden noises, still preferred his mornings quiet and his coffee black. But now, the silence had texture. It had warmth. It had a voice that occasionally argued about blankets. One evening, as rain returned in a gentler form, Logan stood by the bed, folding a blanket with the same careful precision he'd always used. Corners squared, edges aligned. "Woo-woo-woo." Logan paused, eyes closing briefly. "Don't start." Harbour sat on the rug, head cocked, tail sweeping the floor. "It's fine," Logan said. "It's a perfectly good fold." "Woo." Logan turned and looked at him. "You're relentless." Harbour's mouth opened slightly, tongue visible, eyes shining. Logan laughed. "This time it came easy." Later, they sat together on the porch, the rain falling in soft sheets beyond the trees. The harbor lights glimmered faintly through the mist. Harbor leaned against Logan's leg, solid and warm. Logan rested his hand on the dog's neck and looked out at the water. "You know," he said quietly, "you didn't save me." Harbor glanced up, ears twitching. "I think," Logan continued, "we just figured it out together." Harbor let out a contented huff and settled closer. The rain tapped a steady rhythm on the roof. No longer a threat, just a sound. A sound that meant they were here. Alive. Home. When Logan finally stood to go inside, Harbor followed, nails clicking softly on the floor. Logan reached for the blanket, folded it once more, then stopped. "Fine," he said. "You win." He loosened the fold just a bit. "Woo," Harbor replied, satisfied. And in that small, ordinary moment, the silence that once ruled Logan's life gave way to something better. Not loud, not perfect, but real.